Welcome back to Off the Curve. Justin Spiro here. And, I wasn't planning on doing anything tonight, but I have some unfortunate news for Spartan Nation. We thought the conga line of tall white guys that would make grimacing faces towards our sideline and taunt our student section maybe had ended. It began a few years ago with Mo and then a guy named Iggy. Then it was continued with a man named Hunter Dickinson. I thought we might be done. I thought he was either going to go to the league or maybe take one of those lucrative Spanish league offers. It didn't happen. Hunter Dickinson is back. It sucks. Spartan fans that want to poo-poo this or kind of roll their eyes are silly. I'm not saying I'm terrified of Michigan. I'm not. I think they've played to, sort of what a 500 record since Dickinson got there. But at the same time, you can't deny that the 7-foot low down there is a big return for Michigan. I'm not obviously as locked into this Michigan stuff as the man named Anthony Broome is, and that's why we're bringing him in today. So this announcement comes out. Hunter Dickinson is coming back. I'm not as plugged in. Even as the casual Michigan fan, I'm not as plugged in. I don't know where their percentage was on expectation or what, but we'll start just with the expert, Mr. Anthony, who it's great to have you back, by the way, man. Welcome back to some iteration of our content. Were you surprised? Were you surprised by this? I mean, are Michigan fans surprised? Were you surprised? What's kind of the initial reaction here from you guys?
Not 100% surprised. I think that the expectation was that he would maybe test the waters again, but that we had gotten word, us, at the Wolverine, we'd gotten word about probably around the time Michigan football spring game. There were whispers that Dickinson had signed a 1-year lease for an apartment in Ann Arbor, which, you can always take that with a grain of salt. I mean, I think it was Chris Hinton from the football team did the same thing back in the winter, and then he obviously moves on to the NFL, and he's subleasing to Olu Oluwatimi now, the center that they'll have. So it's not always like a one-to-one thing, but it felt like there was a point earlier. It was probably in February or so. Well, we had a media session with Phil Martelli, and it was just after Hunter Dickinson had come back from COVID. And Martelli had basically said something along the lines of, they had a conversation of late where he was feeling pressure because he felt like in the preseason, he was kind of all in on saying it was his last year at Michigan, and maybe that there was a chance that he could come back. And, what we're seeing with him now, I think, is this new trend in college basketball with, listen, if you're a second round guy or you are a fringe guy, the better thing for your brand right now is maybe to cash in on NIL, and NIL is a big driver behind this. He's earning quite a bit of money there. I don't know how it compares to NBA G League or what a second round contract would be from the NBA, but NIL is a big deal here. And I think he's probably going to clean up here for at least one more year. We'll see what happens moving forward, but not 100% surprised that he came back. And it's huge for them because that is, whatever you feel about where Michigan basketball is or what this program will be next year, this guy's your linchpin, and he's the piece you build around. And, in terms of an expectation standpoint, I think, I'm sure we'll get into that here in the conversation, but everything else can kind of branch off of this decision now, which I think is huge for them.
Yeah, I think that's all well said. I think the NIL is such a game changer because the thing is, people say with these kids, I remember when Kalen Lucas was in his senior year and coming back and had a miraculous return from the torn Achilles, and sort of the Michigan fan taunt was like, oh, this guy's not going to the NBA. We'll see him in NBA, Europe, if that wasn't even a thing anymore, but like one of the Spanish leagues or in Lithuania. And then I used to kind of make those jokes too. And you look up what some of these leagues pay. I'm not saying they're NBA salaries, but some of these guys are like Jahlil Okafor's over there making like $400K a year or something like that. It's like, that's a lot more than most people are making. You're the top 1% by a long shot. So like someone like Dickinson before NIL would say, look, even if this NBA thing doesn't work out, Dickinson would be a stud in some of those leagues. I know because I watch them because they're on at 2 a.m. and I'm up studying and I'll gamble on one live and then like come back to it an hour later. Like he'd be awesome in those. So he would have that sort of fallback where maybe he does go. If it doesn't work out, I can just leave. But now with the NIL thing, I think that has been a game changer. So you feel like if NIL isn't in place, he might be gone, or it would have at least increased the likelihood, right?
Oh, for sure. I think it's a huge part of it. I mean, this is all NIL. It's all your brand now and what's best for your brand. And, if Hunter Dickinson wants to keep, selling his, big Dickinson Energy line of clothes, or there's an NIL deal in Ann Arbor that he can profit off of. Like, you're not gonna get that by playing for the Sacramento Kings G League team, right? There's so much more brand exposure that comes with that, and making money and increasing your earning potential, which is, it's fascinating to me, because the argument for years has been, and it's usually the same person having the same argument, which is college basketball is ruined because these guys don't stay anymore, and money is ruining college basketball. Well, now both of those things are kind of, meshing together, where these guys are staying, they are making a ton of money. And I ultimately think, and I'm on board with all of it, obviously, but I ultimately think that this will wind up being a good thing for the sport as a whole, because you won't have those fringe guys just saying, well, I'm probably as good as I'm ever going to be. It's time to go to Europe, or time to go play for, the Grand Rapids Gold, or whatever it is. So yeah, this is huge for him. I tend to believe, and this isn't to say that Dickinson doesn't have things he can improve on. I think he can improve defensively as a rim protector. I think there's probably a little bit of room for him to put a little more muscle on his frame, which is crazy to say about a guy that's 7'2", 260. But I think that he's probably pretty close to a finished product. And when you talk about what it means for Michigan as a whole, I think what it means for the program, and I think I sort of hit on this a little bit earlier. You have that number one guy in place, and then their ceiling is dictated on what everyone else that comes back gives them. I mean, Caleb Houston didn't have a great freshman year. Musa Diabate was all over the place. And as we record this, I mean, we're an hour and a half away from the NBA draft deadline, and we haven't heard anything from those guys yet. So I tend to believe at least one of them is coming back. It's kind of been back and forth, but and everyone just taking that leap internally, like Hunter Dickinson, he put up 18 points a game this, he sort of flew under the radar. I think in a lot of ways he was better than he was last season when he was an All-American, but that supporting cast was a little bit lesser, and that was a young basketball team. And for whatever reason, like, his stock kind of got knocked for it, but I thought he was outstanding this year. And the fact that he's back now, again, it just sets that baseline of, we have this guy, here's how we push it forward from here.
Last offseason, I did a number of shows in our formerly beautiful studio. Someday will be beautiful again. One of them was with Justin Tind and David Klein, obviously on the Spartan side of the aisle, good friends of mine. They were a lot more bullish on Michigan State basketball than I was. I would have to go back and watch the tape, which I hate doing of myself. Like, it's really awkward. But I'm pretty sure Michigan State did exactly what I said they would do. Like, I thought they'd win one game in the tournament, and then that'd be it. That's what I said. Like, it was either right before the year or maybe like a week in. They are who I thought they were. Michigan was not. Chris Castellani was in studio, and I told him, I think a lot of the criticism of Juwan Howard from the typically Michigan State side of the aisle is not fair. Again, this is pre-slap and all that stuff. I thought they were legitimately a top 5 team. Now, I didn't think they were going to win the title. I thought there were a couple teams better on paper going in, but I thought they were a Final Four contender, one of the best 5 or 6 teams in the country. They were preseason 5 or 6, nowhere close. Now, I know they're happy they got to the second weekend again. I get that, but that felt to me like damage control, mitigation of disappointment more than redemption. Mitigation, not redemption. Final Four run is redemption. I don't consider getting to the second weekend redemptive of a team that was supposedly going to be a Final Four contender. Where do you land on this in terms of how it affects them going into next year? Because to me, last year, and maybe you disagree, but last year was an objective disappointment to me. If I'm a Michigan fan, and Absolutely. I just, even as a person not a Michigan fan, it was disappointing on their behalf. Don't you think that they have to, with Dickinson back now, have a very good year and not go through this slog where they're hanging around 500 on the bubble? I feel like they have to come out gangbusters this year, or we do have to at least think about what's going on with Juwan Howard in Ann Arbor. Is that fair, or am I being too cynical?
I don't think you're being too cynical. I mean, this was a case this year of, again, they did have those big expectations for the program. I think that in hindsight, and obviously it's so easy to say this, after they came off of a 19-15 season, I think everyone kind of underrated, they lost 4 pro basketball players off of that team from last year. They lost Isaiah Livers. They lost Chaundi Brown, Mike Smith. I know those are G League guys. Franz Wagner, who, if not for the top 3 of those guys who were, in the Rookie of the Year voting in the NBA, would probably be, right up there in any other year. That was big for them. And that was supposed to be mitigated by bringing in these 2 5-star recruits that were what people say are pros at the prom, potential lottery picks. And they weren't that. And when I look at what this season was, to me, there has never been a clearer case of you are what your record says you are. They lost a lot of very winnable games. They couldn't get out of their own way in several of those games. I mean, should have beaten Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. The Villanova game was right there for them at the end. And yeah, to get out of that first weekend was fun, but it wasn't redemption. It wasn't salvation. It was, okay, even in the worst of years, like assuming that this is the worst it could get for Michigan over the last 10, 12 years, even in the worst year, you still found a way to make the second weekend. And there are a lot of Power 5 programs that would take that. There are a lot of, Michigan fans 15 years ago would have taken that. And that doesn't excuse, what was, it really just wasn't a good season. I mean, They went a whole month toward the end of the year, a month and a half without winning consecutive games. It was rough. So when you look back on, what type of baseline was set, to me, it can be, we can talk about that being the start of something this year or a springboard into this upcoming year if all of these guys come back. But if it was, Hunter Dickinson leaves and then Caleb Houston, Musa Diabate aren't necessarily ready to go yet, but they leave and you're kind of starting all over again, then it's hard to view it's hard to call what this season was a success. Now, how does that inform how we look at this team next season? I'm seeing a lot of, Michigan leading the way in the Big Ten in terms of the way too early top 25s and things like that. I think on paper, sure. Like, I think you can make that argument because there was a, if you do get all these guys back, there is that extra season in, that the John Sanderson, strength and conditioning program has done wonders for guys at Michigan in the past. So you can project that. But again, same deal. Last year, everything looked great on paper. So I think that Juwan Howard's a good basketball coach. I think that whatever they need to do, they need to shoot way more consistently. I don't know what they talk about, getting their shots up and improving, just from within by repetition, but something's got to change there. I mean, they slid defensively, a good 65, 70 spots on KenPom this year. So that needs to improve. I don't question Juwan's coaching ability. I think he does a really nice job of getting them into some good sets. I think they get good looks. They just don't hit them. And, the narrative of this team, it's all about projection with, can this freshman class from this year take that sophomore leap? And that means Frankie Collins is playing a bigger role. He hit the first 3 he hit in the NCAA tournament was the first 3 that he had hit since December or something like that. Kobe Buffkin shot like 15% from 3. Caleb Houston was inconsistent. So on paper, yeah, you can take the leap and say, yeah, on paper, all these guys improved. This team could win the Big Ten. They could be the favorite. But again, it's this weird thing where, the first year was weird because it ended in a COVID year, and there was some drama towards the middle part of the season with the Xavier Simpson stuff and what have you. And then last year they were just so historically good that you don't know if that was an outlier or not. This year, so much went wrong in terms of COVID and the Juwan stuff and injuries, inconsistencies, what have you. There is a part of me that I'm still not sure. I'm not sure what the direction is here. And I think that next year is going to be it's going to be a big step or a big litmus test to see just exactly where they are. It's hard to project, especially when, there could be attrition. You have the transfer portal and all those types of things as well. I expect Michigan is poking around there despite being at the scholarship limit as we record tonight. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure where this is going, but you can reconcile what happened last year if everything comes together this year. But I'm going to be assuming a lot less about this basketball team given what the narratives were last preseason and how it played out. So
I have found their program since Juwan Howard got there very disorienting. I thought their entire season to the Elite Eight was a shocker. I did not see that coming. They were pleasantly surprising in that regard. I found this season sort of shocking in reverse, like the other way. I couldn't believe how bad they were, especially in stretches of the year where they looked really bad. I don't want, and I'll finish here. I don't want to get into the mud with the Juwan Howard slap thing again. That's been done to death. Like, no one wants to break that down or bring that film out or anything like that. But I was thinking about this the other day. The Malice at the Palace occurring, 17 years ago now, 2005, or 2004, 2005 season, 2004. That was obviously a historic, terrible thing that happened in the stands. But I remember the first 5 or 6 games, especially after that, our seats were, not directly behind. I'm not like doing the Bill Simmons bragging thing, but we're somewhat behind the visitors' bench. The first 5 or 6 games after that, if anybody said anything to any of the players on the bench for the visiting team, ushers were on alert, security was perked up. And I mean like innocuous stuff like, hey, you stink or whatever. Nothing even bad or threatening at all. It was this hyper awareness, especially at first, but really that carried for almost an entire year. Similarly, like sticking with the Pistons, even in 07, when they play the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals, LeBron ends up getting destroyed by the Spurs in the finals. Pistons lose Game 6 on the road to Cleveland. I ended up going, I was actually with the Michigan alum, our good bud, Jack Johnson, but we're at this Pistons-Cavs game. Rasheed Wallace, people forget this, had 1 technical left before he would be suspended for the following game by league rule. He gets a technical and ejected from that game when it was still somewhat in the balance, but it was a relatively close game. And I remember thinking that entire couple of days prior, and that game, which I thought the Pistons might win, anytime Rasheed gets mad, just don't get attacked, because you're going to be out for Game 7 and we're fucked. This is a long setup to the question. But Juwan Howard next year, I have to think, if I'm a Michigan fan and I care and I value, I like him, I want the program to do well or at least not be embarrassed. Every single time he gets heated at center court, especially on the road, the visiting fans are going to be 10 times worse than they would have been otherwise. Everyone at home, at least I'll be, is going to be wondering, oh, what is he going to do? Is he going to do something? Do you think that's just sort of natural and it's no big deal? Or do you think there is at least some element of this hanging over, even if it's not valid, the feeling that it's valid? Am I crazy? Because I think that's going to be a thing next year. Or is it in your mind just totally washed down and no big deal at this point?
No, that's part of his legacy now. I know a lot of Michigan fans would like to say, well, look, he hugged Kennedy Chandler at the end of the Tennessee games. Look how good of a guy he is. And like, that's not me saying he's not actually a good guy. He made a mistake, and that's going to follow him for a bit. I was when I was at the Big Ten tournament, I was up in the media riser, kind of more towards where the fans were. And you're already hearing it was his first game back, Juwan for prison, or he should be in jail for assault, and these fans chirping. That's going to follow him. And that's going to be something that, as a highly compensated basketball coach that is a front-facing public figure that did this, is going to be something you have to deal with. And to Juwan's credit, I think, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or anything like that. He did acknowledge that during that suspension, he kicked the tires on going to counseling and getting some therapy, and you learn how to, he was making the point that he was human. Obviously he cannot act up like that ever again. Even like, honestly, there was the stuff with Turgeon last year. There was the stuff at Wisconsin. Like, there are already 2 strikes. So this happens again, in a season where, they could be winning, they could be losing, no matter the circumstance, it can't happen again. But it's something you have to deal with. And it's also a thing where and this is where Hunter Dickinson coming back kind of ties into it. Like, this Michigan doesn't need a bigger target on its back than the block M that it walks around with. Like, that's big enough. You have to take steps to, you don't want to be officiated differently, right? And you don't want there to be some sort of disadvantage against you because of what your reputation is. But it's also one of those things where, you play stupid games and you win a stupid prize. Like, that's something that's going to follow you now. So is it a concern? I don't know if the program seemed to welcome him back with open arms. The players welcomed him back with open arms. Again, it's just going to be when something like this happens, the only thing I'm interested in seeing is what happens next. Because it's pointless to me to dwell on the past and things like that. And apologies were made. Mistakes were made. I don't think in the immediate aftermath, I don't know if Michigan, I think they would definitely have handled that differently in the immediate aftermath of what happened at Wisconsin. But yeah, it's going to follow them now. And, Michigan, as it's one to do, I think will wind up playing, embracing the role as the villain as the result. And that's where I think when you talk about what the identity of this team could be next year, again, you said it already. Hunter Dickinson is going to be a guy that will hear everything at Michigan State when they go to Breslin. He will hear everything when they go to Champaign, when they go to Columbus, what have you. So you just kind of have to wear what you are and what's happened and move forward with, best you can. But it goes back to me saying, like, I'm fascinated to see where this goes next, because, the Sweet 16, that stuff is great. It was fun to, it was a pleasant surprise, but last year was a disappointment. And this is a huge, huge season for them. I think Michigan as a program, like, the baseline to me is that you get to the second weekend based on what John Beilein built and the way they recruit now under Juwan. Like, you want to talk a successful season or have a conversation about it, you've got to get to that second weekend. And then you go from there. So that would be kind of where I would set the bar for right now. Again, assuming that all of these guys are back in full force and they're ready to move forward here.
If there's one thing we've learned this spring, it's that if somebody slaps somebody, you have to do better mitigation on the other end too, because it's so funny. Juwan Howard does the slap at Madison and is allowed to go give a press conference speech and answer questions in a horrible way and make himself look 10 times worse than if he had just not said anything. And then obviously the Will Smith thing, everyone made that joke. But it's like Will Smith is allowed to give an accepted speech. It's like, can we get these people that slap somebody like out of here? Like, maybe give them 24 hours to cool off. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens with going forward with them. But I think that anxiety is going to be there regardless. I'll be frankly rooting for him to jab somebody or uppercut somebody. I'm going to be kind of rooting for the chaos, but yeah, that'd be an anxiety inducing thing for me, frankly. And I don't know. You said he's got 2 strikes already. To keep it like in the basketball parlance, he's got like 4 fouls in the first half. He used up his 2 strikes. The guy's only been there a couple years. Tom Izzo has been at Michigan State for like 30 years and doesn't have one incident like that. He has players grabbing stuff, things that piss Stephen A. Smith off, but nothing where he's threatening another coach or hitting somebody or something like that to where he was suspended. He's never been suspended for anything other than when he had a camp and it's on campus and, they didn't pay a kid or they were supposed to pay a kid or whatever. So I think, like, to have the 4 fouls in the first half that quickly, I can't believe this guy's used up all of his leash already. Like, it's kind of nuts, but I'm going to be watching it intently. I'm going to be watching you guys intently, all your work over there, man. I'm a big fan of yours, begrudgingly, because I hate you guys so much. But I do actually read your stuff and subscribe to your stuff and, love what you do. And looking forward to having you pester me some more going forward if you'll have me and you'll let us have you, man.
Of course. I was taught to kill him with kindness. So that's how we do things here. But I appreciate it. We appreciate the support and always down for the back and forth. So.
Good seeing you, man. Anthony Broome, great seeing you. Ben Augusta, thanks. Short notice, man. Good job by you as always. We'll see you guys soon. A couple of days, probably. See ya.